to give the next keynote, and the subject is on how brands are built on the back of great culture, strong community, and brilliant creativity. To give this keynote is Mr. Rahul Welde, a senior business leader and an expert in media and marketing who comes with rich experience across multiple countries, multiple categories, and multiple sectors. He was with Unilever for 31 years, where he led digital transformation and digital business globally. Even though he's based in UK, he's son of the soil from Pune. He sits on 3 boards, and he's the chair of the advisory board of Migrant Leaders, a charity that helps young migrant leaders. Please join me in welcoming Rahul Welde to the PRAXIS stage.
Look, I'm absolutely delighted to be here, and thank you very much for inviting me. This is one of the easiest speaking decisions that I could take. A, because it's my hometown. I'm, like I said, he said, son of the soil, very much from Pune, so didn't really need an excuse to say yes. And second, I've actually arrived here as a +1, because Sonia, my wife, is really the PR professional, and I'm just somebody who knows a little bit about brands, marketing, and that sort of stuff. So once again, thank you very much, PRAXIS and the team, for having me here. I'm also a little anxious and somewhat disappointed. And I'm anxious because I've got to figure a way out of how do I attend the next PRAXIS. And I'm disappointed because I'm told that speakers have never been repeated for 11 years, which really means for the next 11 years I have no chance. So I'm going to try and make the most of what I have to say here today. Listen, it's absolutely a delight to share with you some nuggets from what I've picked up over the years. Like was mentioned, a little over 30 years with Unilever, across first 15 odd in India, and then the last 15 internationally. And then I've been advising a number of companies, various sectors, and so on. So what I'm really going to share is some perspective. Many of the things I say will resonate with you, and will instinctively you will believe that, yeah, that sort of makes sense. Equally, you might hear some stuff which is at contradiction to what somebody else has said. And as we know, in marketing or in life, in business, there is never one truth. There are multiple dimensions, and all I'll encourage you to do is to reflect on what I'm saying, to be able to process it. If it contradicts, no problem. If it reinforces, no problem at all good. Right. So the topic of our discussion really is winning brands, and how great brands are built on the basis of strong communities, brilliant creativity, and unarguably great culture, right? And it seems pretty straightforward, but actually it's very, very hard to do. So most of the big brands, great brands that you think of, are actually a work of enormous effort, hard work, labor, and a lot of perseverance and dedication. So this seems easy, but it's not. And who would argue that we all want to be part of winning teams, we want to be a part of winning brands, essentially driving growth, driving market share, taking market leadership, and achieving fame. Now, just as I say this, and I just want to pause for a minute and think of, I call it Hall of Fame, but think of it as winning brands, great brands, whatever you want to think of. Think of any brand that comes to your mind in the food category. What's a leading brand? Who's winning in foods? Who's winning in beverages? Who's winning in soft drinks, motorcycles, cars? Take a pause and think of televisions, or think of anything else, and it is likely that you will come across a few big names which would have flashed through your mind instantly as I say this, right? It's quite likely that those brands are perhaps, even if they're not global and they're really winning in India, they are pan-national or big brands. Now, the reason why I want to do this provocation to start with is just to set the frame of when I say great brands, I'm really talking of those which have stood the test of time, which have certainly a strong leadership position in the market, and which are continuing to grow and do better and better. Many of them over decades, some of them even centuries old. I want to spend 2 minutes on what are the fundamental tenets of brand building, absolutely fundamental. And if there's one thing that I would like to reinforce and for all of you to take with, actually 3 things that if you were to take back, I would say those 3 things are right in front of you. Customer centricity, clarity, and consistency. Three things that you should absolutely remember. Actually, no, don't remember these three. Remember only one thing thrice, and that is customer centricity. If you are true in marketing to what your customer need is, what your consumer wants, that is absolutely the starting, middle, and finishing point of the success of your business or your brand. If you're in the agency business, I would argue that don't only think of your client or your customer, but also know deep under the skin your customers and clients' brands. Now that is really hard to do, right? So you go beyond the superficial, dive into the detail, and know your client's business, your customer's business, like it is yours. If you're in the brand's business and you're a corporate, whether it's a company, whether it's a brand, consumer marketing, non-consumer, it really doesn't matter. But it's absolutely important to get under the skin of your customer, to feel a level of empathy and live their space. Now this is very, very hard to do. Immersing yourself and taking that plunge into your customers' lives is absolutely the thing that you will learn in conferences and absolutely the thing you forget as you walk out of this room and get back to your Twitter, Instagram, or whatever. But you have to genuinely think in a customer-centric manner even before you start thinking of brand building. But of course, I've got 3 bullets over there on the chart. The second important thing is clarity. What is your business, your brand, your persona, whatever name you want to use, whichever jargon, but what are you really about? And having that clarity of what you're really about, what you stand for, what is your worth, is really an important thing. This helps, it's a fundamental building block towards great brand building. The better you know and the greater your clarity, the better your chances of winning. And the last thing is about consistency. As I asked you this question about what are the great brands, chances are that those names popped up in your mind when I said beverages, when I said motorcycles, televisions, cars, soaps, whatever, is because they have been consistent in whatever they have been doing over time. Like I said, over decades, maybe even a century. The second thing about consistency, particularly in the context of global brands, as this consistency travels very well. It travels across geographies, across customer segments, consumer segments, because the reality is that by and large, in humanity, most people think alike. They think about winning, they think about giving themselves some benefit, some pleasure, solving some problem. So the more consistent you are in that clarity across time and across geographies, the better chances, again, of success. Almost every single brand which has been successful over a period of time, you will see that they have been absolutely true to this fundamental tenet of consistency. Right. Think of an iconic motorcycle brand globally. If I say iconic motorcycle brand globally, and for those of you who have followed global exposure, either been abroad or read things, watched videos, read about global brands, possibly you're thinking of Harley Davidson, great brand, iconic motorcycle brand, global brand. One of those brands which you think of motorcycles, really as a brand, it stands absolutely right up there. In India, however, there's this brand called Enfield, a business brand which nearly went bust a few years ago and had a great revival. I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago where they had a great revival. From nothing, literally likely to go into bankruptcy to a full revival and getting its roots back, becoming salient, activating a marketing program, highly differentiated, to win back all the territory that they had lost to multiple other brands, whether it was, the Japanese motorcycles or and so on. And they did that with a very, very strong recovery. I'm going to try and refer to, if thinking of brands, there's a great report produced by Kantar. I don't know if anybody from Kantar is in the room, but arguably it's one of the best reports globally where they talk about the most valuable brands. Report called Brandzy. If you are interested in the world of business, which you of course are, in the world of brands, which you of course are, I strongly encourage you to read that report for 2024 and actually read it every year as it comes out. Because it is the Bible of what the great brands are about and what they're doing, and they also include some new emerging hero brands which are coming up. But Royal Enfield changed the game completely for themselves and arguably even for the category, coming out straight out of the trenches and going up, becoming very meaningful for the Indian consumer, becoming absolutely salient, and all of this led to them regaining their position, and as we speak, they've really come out of it brilliantly. Now, whether it is Harley Davidson, whether it is Royal Enfield and some of the other brands, many of them are built on the back of what we would call as a strong community. Now, what is this word community all about? Community is about making sure that your brand is loved by the consumers. It is loved in a manner where they actually become brand advocates. They become your brand ambassadors. They really, really back you and stand behind you, whether it is an issue, whether it is an opportunity, whether it is a new innovation. But true belief in the brand actually builds strong communities. And strong communities are very important simply because what happens is that in the world of brand building, this is a long game that you play. Yesterday we heard some conversation about the short and the long, and the reality is that brand building is a long effort. And all great brands are built on memory structures. So if I say red, it's quite good chance that a couple of brands will come to your mind. Maybe actually only one, right? So the reason why this consistency is important in the communication is because you're trying to build this over a long period of time and trying to embed that memory structure in the mind of the consumer so that the brand becomes strong and stronger. And the community plays a very important role. Now, as we all know, that once we become a part of a community, whatever that might be, we actually begin to buy that into that belief, into that brand much more, and that stands the test of time. So you try and win a consumer once, and you really try to do the right thing by the consumer, you build a strong community. All great brands have in some way actually built strong communities. I mentioned the color red, and chances are very, very high that everybody, or most people at least, would have thought of Coca-Cola, right? They pretty much own red in a manner of speaking, especially in the world of brand building. And you could argue that they are one of the world's most iconic brands. When I said iconic beverage brand, anybody thought of Coca-Cola? Right, a lot of people thought of Coca-Cola. Roughly about 40% of the room, chances are their market share is also about 40%. I don't know the stats, but chances are it is actually very high, and they are indeed one of the world's leading brands. But I want to talk about another brand, Red Bull. Now, this is a brand, everybody knows Red Bull here? Red Bull, beverage brand, strong beverage brand, very differentiated and hugely successful. Unbelievably successful despite the might of some of the biggest global beverage brands in the category. But they took a very different approach, they took a very different position, and you can see over here that the reason why they're so successful is because they're different. When you think of marketing, when you think of public relations, when you think of advertising, they took a completely different stance, which is about creating great content, almost sort of owning media properties, doing things which are along the lines of adventure sports and sports, but taking it to a completely unheard of level. And year after year, they produce this magic where you're wondering, like, what's going to come next? A few years ago, a man jumped from the space, the first person to jump, and all captured live. Like, who would think of jumping from the space? Leave alone the person, but why would a brand think like that? But they highly differentiated something that creates... Anybody seen a Red Bull ad here? Unlikely. But everybody, there could be a Red Bull ad, at least I haven't seen one, but there must be one. But those are not ads. They're creating great content, doing marketing in a differentiated way, doing PR the hell out of it, right? So everything behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, the actual event itself, the post-event, the pre-event, how you thought it, and all of that is actually making the brand famous. Of course, the product is unique, the product is differentiated, it's one of the first kinds of energy drink. All of that is true, but from a marketing standpoint, from a brand building standpoint, a very different position that they've taken. And naturally, especially among the youngsters, Red Bull, very popular energy drink. This does not mean that Coca-Cola has been unseated. No, Coca-Cola's memory structures, great brand, still very strong. All it means is that in a category, a brand like Red Bull has become great from a challenger and actually, a leader in its specific subcategory of energy drinks. Great example. Creativity. Lot of discussion on creativity. It's perhaps one of the most talked about words in seminars and conferences, whether it is Cannes, whether it is any other awards. Everybody loves to celebrate creativity. Everybody likes to believe that they individually are creative, their teams are creative, and they're pushing the boundaries. Now, this is by far, again, a very important aspect of brand building. This is important because we know that in the competitive world, breaking through the clutter is really, really difficult. Lots of clever people are doing lots of similar things, and therefore, there is a constant pursuit that we have to be that much more different than everybody else. And the more different you are, the more stronger you are, and naturally for that, creativity is a big enabler. Creativity, for the purpose of this room, for the purpose of marketing, for the purpose of business, is not about ads. Ads is the creativity that we read about in magazines, hear about it on television. Those are the things which win awards. But the reality is that creativity is multifaceted. From a business standpoint, you've got to think of innovation in product, innovation in channels, innovation in advertising, marketing, activation, the whole lot. So whenever somebody's confronted this idea of being creative, unleashing creativity, what does brilliant creativity mean? It is across multiple dimensions. Having said that, it is very often misunderstood or seen only in the form of advertising. And naturally, therefore, from a public relations standpoint or from a communication standpoint, one is always challenged to think of what does creativity really mean. But creativity is about ideas. It is about making sure that one is taking into account the consumer logic and the consumer sentiment, and then coming up with those ideas which are highly differentiated. Nike, anybody thought of Nike when I said shoes? I didn't probably say apparel or shoes brand, but if I did, chances are that you would think of Nike, you would think of Adidas. And if you didn't, then I'd say that let's get clued on to what's happening in the marketing world, because this is one of the most iconic brands in the world. And I would say that perhaps in any category. And the reason why it's iconic is not because it's a global leader, it has great market capitalization, a big brand with a lot of market value. All of that is absolutely true. But also because, like I said at the beginning, for the last several years, it has stood for something. It has stood for something which is unique. It took on the mantle of promoting sportsmen which came from diverse backgrounds. It took on the mantle of sustainability in a different way, of social good in a different way, and created for itself a position which is very, very hard to beat. A position which is very strong and something that they own. No surprises then that Nike is a leader in its category. And a leader in apparel, a leader in shoes. When I say this, and I know many of you are thinking right now, oh, but a lot of new brands are disrupting and taking away share from Nike. A lot of new brands are disrupting and taking away share from Coke and Red Bull and what. And that is absolutely true. Look, it's a competitive world, and business is as competitive actually as anything else that you can think of. Like in sports, you're continuously trying to win and beat the opponent. Guess what you're doing in business is continuously trying to win the consumer and be better at it than your opponent, than your competitor, every single day. In the FMCG business, for most of my life was in FMCG business, and I would always sort of think that, losing 0.25% market share was a big deal. You'd lose sleep. Like, what's really going on? You cannot lose an inch. If you concede an inch, a foot will go away. So you cannot do that. Now, in that competitive world, to have a point of difference, to execute consistently, to take the brave decisions, a very hard call. Culture. Now, all of this is great, but this is on the bedrock of strong culture. You cannot do creativity, consistency, everything that I've spoken about. At the heart of it is about culture. Culture, we know, is about leadership, but it's also about the teams. And what is the common holding thing that binds us together, that gives us common motivation? We heard earlier in the session, in the context of what was discussed, it was the country, the pride for the country, the winning, that I want to win it for my country. Now that is culture. So I want to win it for my brand, I want to win it for my company, I want to win it for my client. It doesn't matter whether you want to be the leader or you don't want to be a leader, you want to be a challenger. If you want to be a challenger, guess what? Be the best at it. Best challenger in the world. If you want to be number 3, be the best number 3 that ever can be. Of course, let's not keep going down. I think 1, 2, 3 is about fine. But the reality is that you have to absolutely embed a culture which is about winning, which is about consumer centricity, ensuring that, all these values of the brand and the company, corporate, are lived. I'm from Unilever. I spent, like I said, all my growing up over years. I didn't know any better, actually, much like, anybody else who starts out of university. I happened to be lucky to be selected, maybe a little bit of talent, but a lot of luck for sure, and joined a company, and it's built great brands. And I thought I might try and tease out some of the other nuggets of this idea of culture, creativity, community through the lens of a very, very famous brand. Very famous, certainly for me, a brand which is, Dove, that's the brand. So we're talking about Dove over here, and Dove, as you know, is a very unique brand, very strong. It's not very old, actually. It's about a couple of decades old, growing year on year, and one of the biggest brands when it comes to personal care, and not just personal care, but in the FMCG category, one of the biggest brands in the world. A biggest brand across, I think, a little over 190 countries or thereabouts. And the reason why Dove is so great and become a big brand is because it's very unique. It took a position which was quite unique right at 20 years ago and stays true to that. If I think of real beauty, there isn't a brand which talks of real beauty, which lives real beauty, anything better than Dove. If you think of self-esteem for women, very simple to think of self-esteem, very topical, by the way, right now, last several years. But real beauty, self-esteem for women. So something which is very core to Dove is actually what makes it famous, this point on consistency. And naturally they find in every time that they activate the brand, where the brand comes to market, reaches its consumers, tries to do it in the most unique, different, and relevant way as possible. We all know that and I'm going to show 2-3 creative expressions, but really across the last 1 year, if you're in the marketing and communications world, we've all been thrown back by this thing called AI. And what is AI going to do to communication? Lots of different things are going to be produced by computers and artificial intelligence. What's the role of creativity? And in that model, in that whole sort of conversation which is taking place, Dove took a very unique way to say that how are they actually going to leverage AI. I'm going to show a short film which brings to life the position that they took. And the reason I say this is because while everybody's trying to say that they are leveraging AI in a particular way, here's a brand which creatively, I must say over here, and I think there's a lot of conversation always around whether it's a creative agency, whether it's a media agency, the PR agency, and so on. But if I think of a brand like Dove, I can assure you, having been in the tent inside, that PR has played a very, very strong role in the success of the brand. If there's one brand in the world, somebody asks you saying, tell me one brand where PR has played a very important role in the brand success, you can close your eyes and say Dove. I will back you for it, but equally I promise you the entire Dove team will back you for it. So for the purpose of this room, I don't know of other brands. I can tell you that you can anywhere in the world say PR is actually as critical to the success of this brand the other is. I digress a little bit. Yeah, exactly. I think everybody deserves a round of applause for being in PR. I'm going to get back and show you a commercial which was recently aired, actually a few months ago, which brings to life the philosophy of Dove in a very Dove-like way and yet addresses this topical conversation of AI. Let's take a look at the video.
Come with me and you'll be in a world of pure imagination. Take a look and you'll see into your imagination.
I'm sure that this resonated with a lot of women in the audience, right? And men too, absolutely men too. And as it resonates, if it didn't, then you're really disconnected from what's happening to yourself and in the world. But if it did, then you are just one of the 6, 7, 8 billion people on the planet. But the reality is, Dove stands for this, which is to say that we will not stereotype beauty. Beauty is who you are, what's inside you, etc. Right? Now, this is a very important aspect, and I bring this because, look, I said Dove is a great brand. Everybody agree? Hopefully, yes. No hands went up, but I assume that's still a yes. Okay, right, a few. Dove is also one of the most creative brands in the world. You'd be surprised, 15 Cannes Lions in 2024 alone. I think 14, 15 of that order. 50 Cannes Lions over 4 years. And for those of you who are familiar with Cannes, you would know that how hard it is to win at Cannes. Really, really hard. When I used to be the media director in India, this was what, 2006, 2007, I was here for about 3 years. So 2004 when I took over, I said, what is the biggest award for creativity and media and all of that in the world? And naturally, I was new to that discipline, so a lot of people said, it's Cannes. I said, okay, we've got to make sure that our team wins a Cannes. And everybody said, like, what are you talking about? We've never won, we never even dreamt of one. It is very, very hard. It took me, the team rather, but it took 7 years before we got to win the first Cannes Lion for the team. 7 years. So the reason I bring this up is because creativity is not, it could be a flashbulb, that's great. But it's also about making sure that you're running a process, you're running really innovation, you know, keeping sure that making sure that the fire is burning so that you actually have the pursuit of creativity not as a one-off flash and then you get disappointed, but you be at it every single day, every single year. 50 Lions in 4 years, 14 in 2024, one of the most celebrated brands it comes to creativity. Now that film certainly resonates with this audience, but doesn't necessarily resonate with the rest of the world. It doesn't perhaps resonate with many parts of India, diverse cultures, and what's that film? What does it mean in India? I want to show a film which is specific to India from about 3 years ago. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago when they ran this campaign called Stop the Beauty Test. I want to show the film and then talk about it a little bit. Let's take a look at the film.
ये सिर्फ हमारी नहीं, देश की करोड़ों लड़कियों की कहानी है।
मैं है किस रेडी।
चलो भी चलो, जल्दी करो। ऐ की दीदी, साड़ी पहनाने की बात हुई थी ना, फिर वजन दिखाई दे रहा है।
अब इसमें भी दिखाई दे रहा है।
हुन तुसी जल्दी करो, लड़के वाले आ गए ने।
इससे ढक लो बेटा, जल्दी आ जा। महक आ जा बेटा।
अस्सलाम वालेकुम। आजा नूर, आजा। फोटो में तो रंग साफ लग रहा था ना?
बेटा, आप दोनों चाहो तो बाहर चाय पी लो। जा नूर।
सीढ़ी लगाकर बात करना पड़ेगा आपकी राजेश्वरी को हमारे लड़के से।
बट जोक्स अपार्ट, अपने बाल स्ट्रेट करा लेना, भाई को नूडल्स नहीं पसंद।
ये दाग
कब तक चलेगी खूबसूरती की ये बदसूरत परख? आखिर कितनी खूबसूरती काफी है? डव, खामियां नहीं, खूबियां देखिए।
These are real stories of real women, the real India. Reason I show this film is because it brings in context, relevant to our audience over here, relevant to India, what this idea of beauty and real beauty means. Much the same way, just this year, Dove took it a step forward. I'm teasing this through the lens of Dove so that we see this point on consistency and how it is bring to life. And again, Mothermonials was the new campaign which was launched. I think this is a really cool campaign, particularly should be of great interest to this room because a lot of it is anchored around PR, a lot of it is anchored around relationships with publications and starting a conversations where we know that traditional matrimonials in the context of India ask for the bride or the groom to be XYZ, certain stereotypes, and that is what really the whole matrimonial aspect was about. This was a campaign which was run across various different platforms, various different media. I might have shown you the films, but the reality is that this sort of work actually lives multiple dimensions in various media. Again, I'm going to show you a film and come back to it in terms of what are some key learnings and some of the key aspects. Let's take a look at the film.
I've made some notes. 10. I was paraded in front of 10 boys, all under the garb of prospective grooms. I felt as though I was on sale. ये बातें भूलती नहीं है. लड़की थोड़ी मोटी है. She will look older than our son. That's the reason for my rejection. I started to rebel and started calling myself a TOD. A thing on display. My daughter won't go through all of this. She won't be walking around with a tray full of teacups. She has a master's degree in environmental sciences and sustainability. And in all possibility, you may have bumped into her because she's all the time running around convincing people कि don't throw your kuda here and there. After all this, if you're still interested in her height, weight and color, then होने वाले son-in-law जी, ऐसी कूड़ा सोच के लिए there is no place in our family. Still interested?
So this is about these kind of brands which win forever. Just a quick word before I wrap up. I mentioned Kantar, Brandsy, all due credit. A lot of the work about evaluating brands comes from them. Here you'll see 6 brands which are for the last 10 years being among the top 10. And much the same way across these categories, across these 5 categories, the number 1 brand 10 years ago, the number 1 brand in 2024 is the same. This is the point about longevity and consistency when it comes to winning brands. Great. So that's it really from me. Talking about winning brands, I think we'll have some time for Q&A hopefully and look forward to the Q&A session. Thank you.
That's right, Rahul. That's right. Thank you so much. So can you just request you to take the seat on your left? I want to invite Madhu Chhibber, Executive Vice President and Head of Corporate Communications at HDFC Bank, to come and have a conversation. Rahul, we have, about...
Yeah.
Hi. Rahul, that was a fantastic presentation, and thank you for sort of bringing us back from a very emotional beginning to the day to the practicalities of the life that we live in a world of brands. You've worked for one of the world's largest consumer goods companies for 30 years, and they sell their products, or their products are used by more than 3.4 billion people every day. That's about 40% of the world's population across 190 countries. So I'm speaking to the right person for brands. You sort of started with some very interesting, or you had some very interesting examples with Dove and Nike, both showing integrated campaigns where marketing and PR sort of intertwine very seamlessly. So, what can PR do to be better recognized as an important co-creator and oftentimes the driver of this integrated communication? You know, because a lot of the examples we see tend to be advertising.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and you pick on the absolutely right examples of Dove and Nike. Both leverage PR to a very great extent, and co-creator is the right word. I think it all starts by first framing what is your role in the life of the brand, and what role do you choose to take. Very often, in my experience over years, I've seen PR, corporate relations, to almost take, if not a back seat, a side seat. So the first thing that I would encourage everybody to do is to lean forward and want a seat at the table, want at the seat of where creative ideas are discussed, marketing strategies are discussed, rather than be the go-to people just for crisis or other kind of communications. By the way, that doesn't mean that that is not important. It's just that you want to be an equal player when it comes to the world of marketing. The second belief that I've had built actually over the last several years is that it is not easy to be a driver of anything, because everybody wants to be a driver, and we know that we cannot have 10 drivers to a car or 5 drivers to a car. So it is important that you collaborate and you're a part of an integrated team. That team is creative agencies, media agencies, PR agencies, media people, PR people. So this notion of who's driving, it is the brand, the customer, who's actually driving things, and of which all of us need to be a part. So, but I'd encourage everybody who's in the business of PR, public relations, arguably even corporate communication, to be integrated into the teams. If that's not happening with your bosses or whatever the organization is, lean forward and get involved. That would be my key message there.
Integrated is great, but you know, there are boundaries that each function has. So it will take a huge effort to sort of stop defining those boundaries for functions to bring out these truly, you know, like you said, integrated and collaborative pieces of work.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit about personal leadership and what you want to be a part of, and whether you want to take that proactive role. If your personal leadership mantra is not to push those boundaries, then actually you're already not trying to win. You have to push boundaries. You have to push boundaries within the organization, with your customers, with your clients. If you are clever, hardworking, committed, dedicated, contributing strongly, there's no reason why you won't get a seat at the table. But just by wishing that we attended a conference and now, you know, we are a little more clever, so we should get a seat, no, it won't happen. You got to break the doors. You got to be at it every day. I think the job for PR professionals is harder. It's much harder. And the reason is because historically, not many people have actually pushed those boundaries. I think in today's day, the job for PR professionals to get a seat at the table is infinitely easier. I cannot think of a CEO, a brand leader, who does not recognize the value of PR. So I think PR professionals and PR agencies, PR teams have to think of their own roles differently as being contributing to growth and the brand, rather than just being the ones in the defense game of crisis or corporate relations, employee communication. So much more than that.
Okay. So when we think of Nike, fabulous brand, but invites controversy more often than not with its brilliant, you know, campaigns. So that brings me to the sort of thought that all publicity is good publicity. We're kind of overturning that thought over here. So when brands push the envelope on creativity, the consequences can vary, as you've shown us. How can PR teams find that right balance, you know, to not land in a space that invites controversy, which is sensitivity and creativity, but a right balance?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Of course, you must be sensitive to whatever are the cultural nuances, etc. But the reality is, I don't think it pays to be safe. When we talk of pushing boundaries, when we talk of doing new things, you have to take an element of risk. You have to apply your judgment, you have to look at the data in front of you and take that risk. So take the example of Nike, which was being described. At a point in time in the US, it divided, you either loved Nike or you hated Nike. And for sure, in the boardroom, everybody would have taken a very conscious call to say that this is a battle worth taking on because we stand for something. This does not mean it's right or wrong. And likewise, you know, for any brand, like you take the example of Dove, when they say real beauty in a world where so many other beauty stereotypes are pretty much prevalent, it takes a little bit of courage, a little bit of risk. If you try to be average, guess what you will end up being? Really good average. I mentioned earlier about being a great leader, a great challenger, or a great number 3, and none of those 3 are average. They're all 3 are better than average. So it's really important that one takes a little bit of risk, pushes the boundaries, and with it come consequences which you got to, work out and figure out how you're going to tackle.
Rahul, you had roles in media, marketing, digital transformation at one of the world's largest, very successful company. What's the one big risk you took and you're proud of?
Oh, one big risk. I took actually many risks. Some of them are career risks because I did a number of roles in Unilever. Pretty much the first one was not connected with the previous one and the next one was not connected with the previous one. So there was element of risk. I see that as exciting. It worked out well for me, so that's been brilliant. From a brand and from a campaign standpoint, many risks. Whether it was in the context of a brand like Lifebuoy, in the context of a brand like Lux. So for example, many of you will remember that at a point in time, Shah Rukh Khan was the ambassador for Lux. Now that was quite unusual, right? Where do you see Shah Rukh Khan when there have been the other great women of India, beautiful women who've been... So yeah, I think there is nothing about risks. I know our time is up, but if there was one message I wanted to leave with everybody, I would say it's about making sure that from a PR professional, PR standpoint, communication standpoint, lean forward, get under the skin of your brand, the consumer, and absolutely make sure that you don't demand a seat at the table, that you deserve a seat at the table. There's a difference in the two. None of you should demand a seat at the table, but you should be actually looking at how do you deserve a seat at the table.
I have many questions, but one that sort of was, as I was seeing these films, there is a purpose that seems to be a conversation that's more a modern conversation purpose. But we've seen brands like these with simplicity of messaging and staying true to their philosophy have in a sense adopted purpose long back. So do you think that's relevant even for the smaller brands, and how can they make it as big as some of these iconic ones?
Yeah, I think great brands have purpose. So it could be as simple as sharing happiness, delivering happiness. It's been there for years, actually, this idea of purpose. It's just that from a communication standpoint, it's got crystallized into this lofty idea that all of us must have a purpose of doing something dramatic. But to my mind, at least, great brands, many of them actually have purpose embedded in them. And it manifests in different ways. I just showed examples which are more television-led so that it takes the entire audience along with what I was saying. But in all forms of communication, this idea of purpose or what the brand stands for remains important. So whether it is banking, whether it is cars, whether it is soaps, every brand stands for something, and it's important that they actually communicate that. I gave an example of Lux. That is absolutely a different beauty brand from what Dove is. And that's the best part of brand building, that no two brands are alike actually. Everybody tries to be different, and that's what makes it very exciting.
Thank you very much, and delighted to have had this chat.
Thank you. Great to talk to you all.
Thank you so much.